Hello, and welcome to the show. Today, we're talking about Tomb Raider. More specifically, the 2015 definitive edition of the 2013 series reboot. I figured I'd cover this as the third game has returned to Game Pass, and also this one just came over this week. I completed the achievement list on Xbox Series S, so that's what we're going to cover for today. As with all my 100% reviews, this video will cover if the game itself is worth your time, and if you should complete the full achievement list. So let's get down to it. Right off the bat, I just gotta say that Tomb Raider is an excellent game. Not only does it hold up in 2024, it's a fantastic reimagining of the source material that respectfully expands upon the series and successfully reintroduces one of gaming's most well-known characters. It's not perfect, but I'll tell you right now that it's worth playing. Tomb Raider is both a product of its time and ahead of its time. On the one hand, it presents a gritty survivor story while falling into the trappings of what was marketable in 2013. High production values are on full display here, with the title keen on throwing you into a million explosive set pieces, fighting a faceless set of goons, and navigating some amazing environments. Like any big budget game 11 years ago, there's also a tacked on multiplayer component, and trust me, we will get into that later. At a high level, the story explores Lara and her crew of colleagues and friends exploring an island off the coast of Japan. Known for its mysterious, dangerous weather patterns, the island was once home to a native group ruled by the Sun Queen, whose supernatural abilities allowed her to control the weather. Over the years, various nations have briefly settled on the island due to shipwrecks and exploratory interests, leaving the setting open to a dangerous wasteland of scavengers and mercenaries known as the Solari. Lara must learn to come to grips with exploring her own interests on the island while doing what it takes to save her friends against an evil faction with a penchant for the supernatural. It's an intriguing enough premise that strongly recalls many elements from Indiana Jones, but the story takes a backseat to the gameplay. In the beginning, you'll start off slow as an emerging survivor, scavenging animal hides and setting up camps while upgrading abilities. I really appreciate how the game took its time to make you feel like you were becoming an unwilling survivor in the beginning, while introducing most of the major mechanics early on. But it's really off to the races after this. After the first section, you'll really hit the ground running. Tomb Raider has a ton of gameplay variety. From hunting to third-person shooting, you'll be exploring the island for collectibles like relics, GPS caches, challenges, and of course, tomb raiding. The main currency in this game is salvage, which you'll use to upgrade your weapons, and of course, we have to have a skill point tree. Tomb Raider pretty much grants you experience for everything you do in the game, so you won't have too much trouble upgrading Lara and feeling like a walking tank about halfway through the game. I will say that the game is quite the collectathon, and you're going to need to find a bunch of well-hidden collectibles to really maximize your experience. There's just enough for it to be annoying if you're going for the 100%, and while each new setting was an exciting change of pace from the last, it can be a real downer to see that there's a whole new list of collectibles to find in each area. Luckily, you can fast travel at base camps scattered throughout the game, so nothing is truly missable, even after you've completed the story. Let's talk about the best parts of Tomb Raider, the traversal and set pieces. As an explorer, Lara has obviously been working on her upper body strength because there's not 10 minutes that goes by without scaling a wall or grappling ledges. Movement feels natural for the most part, and the controls feel great as you're climbing around. You'll be sliding, flying, falling, and running from so many enemies, explosions, and various hazards that you'll feel like you're in a Michael Bay movie. And that's great because the game doesn't demand the seriousness or overt silliness that something like this could turn into. It all feels right in place as you manage to scale the most demanding environments. Now, the set pieces are crazy, and I was really surprised at how great this game looks all these years later. The presentation is spot on as you climb giant towers, brave harsh winds and shipwrecks on a beach, or just run from an exploding compound. Tomb Raider does everything in its power to command your attention and keep it. There's never a dull moment, and it's all beautiful. A giant portion of this game revolves around combat, and it all works pretty well for the most part. Lara has access to shotguns, rifles, pistols, grenade launchers, and a bow that works as a great stealth mechanic. Speaking of that, the game allows you to go guns blazing or quietly make your way through many sections. For the lion's share of the game, you can pick the way that you want to handle enemies, and it's nice that there's an option for the player. There are many sections where you'll be forced to fight hordes of bad guys, but I can appreciate that there's light stealth as well, especially when exploring. The main issue with the combat system is that there's just a bit too much of it, and you'll be fighting about 4 to 5 different types of enemies. Don't get me wrong, it's fun to blast your way through a bunch of fights, but the few unique character designs get recycled eventually as you work your way through the game. By the end, you'll recognize that guy that you killed 20 times beforehand. Sometimes you'll be given a weapon that has a special ability to progress with interactions with the environment, but that feels more like an afterthought. That and the bow doesn't have way too much use when you realize that you can hunt all animals with your shotgun or rifle. Also, we mentioned that Tomb Raider was a product of 2013 in many ways. You're going to feel that with numerous QuickTime events, and it's so excessive and sometimes takes away from what could have been a way better encounter. This was a real problem back then, and it's not any better in Tomb Raider. Despite my criticisms so far, it's all really minor and only served as an area of improvement for the game's sequels. That's to be expected in the first title in a new series, so I can forgive most of the minor annoyances and design on that front. I'll say that the weakest element of the campaign is easily the story itself. It's a fine premise to start on, but the story quickly becomes an afterthought to the gameplay. I don't know if this is unique to me or if everyone experiences this, but I kind of just forget about the plot after learning the language of the game. There's one point when you're tasked with saving your friends halfway through who've been absent for 90% of what you've been doing up to that point, and I didn't remember their names and didn't particularly care about them as characters, but the game kind of just thrust you back into it. I don't think the reboot was particularly known for its plot elements, but part of me feels like this would have been better off as a solo adventure. None of your friends really hold any impact except for Jonah, and even then it's not an entirely engaging portion of the game. The story does dip into the supernatural elements pretty heavily, kind of riding the line between that Raiders of the Lost Ark and Temple of Doom feel. That didn't bother me too much, but it'll be a little too ridiculous for some people. I'd also say that this presents itself in the least favorable way in the last section of the game. The last hour or two outstays its welcome and kind of runs out of steam by the end. Regardless, the gameplay elements are what keep it fresh and fun. A big standout and shocker here is the brutal nature of the game. This was the first M-rated title in the series, and it earns it. From the very start, you're plunged into a world of gore, body parts, and viscera scattered about, and the way you dispose of enemies is unrelentingly violent. It's fitting for such a story about survival, but also jarring since Lara is too disgusted by her first kill. It's kind of wild how she essentially becomes the most dangerous and vengeful person on the island, even if the enemies have no real morals. It's like a vegan eating a hamburger for the first time and never eating vegetables again. Interestingly enough, Lara is also no stranger to graphic death animations, which I don't feel particularly inclined to show here. Super gritty stuff. If you're going for the 100%, you can also expect to complete various weapon challenges. Get these out of the way first and try to pull as many enemies off of ledges and shoot them off of zip lines whenever you get the opportunity. It'll save you a second playthrough. Speaking of that, there's one achievement called Chatterbox that demands you to complete conversations with your crew over the course of the game until about 3/4 of the way in. I missed it early on and had to speedrun a second playthrough to get it, so please, look out for that one. I remember my brother going for that when we actually had a day off of school back in 2014. Obviously, we didn't mind it as much when we had that time off, but this time it was definitely annoying when I was specifically going for the achievement. So in general, that's the story or campaign, if you will. Really, this is a great game, and the traversal, combat, and movement mechanics are a whole lot of fun, and the set pieces, settings, and just general nature of the game is great to look at. It's constantly exciting. Once again, it really grabs, demands, and keeps your attention, and it's one of those games that just kind of hit at the right time. It holds up really, really well in 2024, and I highly recommend that you play it, if only for the campaign mode. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the multiplayer. That is the other portion of this game, and I gotta say, this one is just we're gonna get into it. So yeah, you remember when every game had to have a tacked on multiplayer mode around this time? Tomb Raider definitely fell victim to that. In 2010, it was season passes. In 2013, it was multiplayer. In 2016, it was loot boxes and microtransactions. And today, it's live service and cosmetics. It's a vicious cycle, and I can definitely say that the MP here is rough. The multiplayer here is like the $5 footlong. It ain't ever coming back. And trying to do anything naturally in this mode isn't happening because it's completely dead. This was a problem even a few months after the game's original release, and I'm baffled that they brought it back at all in the Definitive Edition. Let's talk about it. There's 4 standard modes that anyone will be familiar with, and you can play the ranked or casual version of each. Much of the multiplayer achievements assign you with random tasks such as surviving explosions, winning ranked matches, winning matches on each map, and various escape or elimination tasks. By far, though, the most demanding and awful part of the multiplayer is the grind to level 60 and the need to purchase all characters and weapon loadouts. Lara isn't even available as a playable character until you hit max rank. Oh, and by the way, getting to 60 requires well over 1,000,000 experience points. So, you might be asking, Noah, how did you possibly finish all the multiplayer achievements in a dead mode? I have two answers to that. First, shout out to the super helpful guys on True Achievements. I joined a session for a week out and asked the guy if he wanted to knock out the miscellaneous achievements early, and that led to an impromptu session of myself and his buddies blowing each other up, trapping one another, hacking everyone with our melee attacks, and just getting it done. So, not bad on that front. Now for the worst part. In order to get to level 60, you have to grind one mode, and you can do it solo. But that mode is Rescue, where you pick up medical supplies across the map and bring it back to a safe zone, netting you a good amount of experience for each time you do it. I still shudder thinking about it, especially when I did it jointly with my brother a decade ago, and it's even worse today. This is the ultimate form of mindless farming, and it takes about 10 hours on the quick side. But wait, there's more. You can only do this as a survivor, and you still need to collect salvage to buy all of the characters, which you can only do as a Solari. So, for this, I would just pick up 20 medical supplies and rescue for 10 minutes, then play as a Solari running around and collecting salvage boxes for another 10 minutes, and then do one more round of collecting medical supplies to finish each game. This sucks, and it's not passive either. You can't just pause the game, because if you don't move for 30 seconds, the private solo match you created will kick you out for inactivity. So basically, you have to be intentional about an awful grind. This took me so long that I actually completed Ghostwire Tokyo to 100% before I even finished this. By the end of it all, I was really ready to just finish everything up. And it really didn't take away from the game as a whole for me, but it definitely affected how I would recommend that you play this game in terms of 100% achievement criteria. For that matter, the multiplayer, it's nothing special, and if you try to get it done today, it's just going to be a pain in your butt, so I wouldn't recommend even playing that at all. Now, I've done a lot of complaining, but I made the choice to do it, and it's nobody's fault but my own here. It's just my compulsive need to see a 100% next to almost every game I play, and that's fine, because the point here is to inform you on how it's worth spending your time, so it's all worth it to me, at the very least. Let's break it down. Is Tomb Raider worth your time? Yes, the game absolutely is. It plays so well in 2024, and it's always exciting to traverse your way through beautiful environments, level up your character, and fight your way through enemy hordes as an amazing reimagination of one of gaming's coolest characters. Play the campaign, not the multiplayer. Is it worth the 100% completion? No, I don't believe it is. The spark is long gone after doing everything the story has to offer, and if not for the multiplayer, I would have said yes to this question. But as it stands, no sane person will want to do a grind that'll add an extra 20 hours to your experience with the game. Overall, Tomb Raider is a sensational title. It's a great start to a new series, and it does most of what it sets out to do with aplomb. While the plot and story elements don't quite stick the landing, the gameplay does a million times over. It's great to say this all these years later. And I commend the developer Crystal Dynamics for creating a modern classic that reignited the franchise so well. I'm happy to say that Tomb Raider is worth your time, and you can check it out on Game Pass now. Alright, so that wraps things up for this video. I do appreciate everybody listening in. I'm going to do more 100% reviews and obviously movie reviews as they come along, but my next planned idea is probably for Ghostwire Tokyo or the Battlefront Classic Collection. Now, both of these definitely were some labors of love, and it's going to be interesting bringing them over to you, but for the time being, it's great to actually get these reviews out. On the one hand, I love completing a game to 100%. As I mentioned before, I feel like that's a worthy use of my time if I do play video games, but this really completes the experience. So hopefully you like what you heard or saw here today, and I definitely appreciate you tuning in. If you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see or things I can do better, especially in terms of my editing, please feel free to leave a comment below because I always appreciate the feedback. But until then, I'm Noah, and I appreciate your time.